It's in the list. Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Randall Leverett, a member of the Police Reform Committee. Thanks for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight for the first listening session of the Police Reform and Reinvention Steering Committee. As you are aware, your town board established the committee under the auspices of Governor Executive Order 203, New York State Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. This order requires, in addition to soliciting input at community sessions like these, that the steering committee accomplish as best it can the following. 1, review the needs of the communities served by its police agency and evaluate the department's current policies and practices. 2, review for the purposes of addressing the particular needs of the communities served by such police agency and promote community engagement to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy, and to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. 3, establish policies that allow police to effectively and safely perform their duties. 4, involve the entire community in the discussion. 5, develop policy recommendations resulting from this review. 6, offer a plan for public comment. 7, present the plan to the town board to ratify or adopt, and then the town board will, 8, certify adoption of the plan to the state budget director on or before April 1st, 2021. Tonight is the first of many listening opportunities. In November and December, working around holidays and COVID-19, we will host private group Zoom sessions to hear specific concerns that may need to be addressed. From there, the steering committee will craft recommendations and policy changes with the chief. The committee will then present those recommendations again to you at another public town hall session for feedback and questions. It will then consider those comments and questions, make revisions if necessary, and present a final document in March to the town board. I'd like to identify other members of the committee who have joined tonight. Hands in the chat area of Zoom, you will be queued to speak. Each speaker will have 2 or 3 minutes depending on the number of people here tonight. Please state your name and whether you live in the town, village, or elsewhere. If a previous speaker has raised or spoken to a concern that is important to you, it would be great if you'd pass and let others speak so that we can hear as many different concerns and issues as possible. Rest assured, if it's raised once, it's on the table for review and discussion. If you do choose not to speak or would like to communicate with us later, you can email us at npprc@gmail.com. Let's begin. Moderators, who do we have up first? And would you state your name, whether you live in the village, town, or elsewhere?
Hi, Randall. First, I just want to apologize for what happened there. That was obviously not okay. And then I apologize for everyone who had to view that. And I am currently trying to make sure that anyone who was involved in that has been removed. And I apologize for people having to experience that. That being said, if people could raise their hand, and if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat too, just your name as well, just so I don't accidentally add someone who participated in what just happened. There is no one else who has their hand up at the moment. I see Harper Keene has his hand up.
Carol Nolan, I believe, has her hand up.
Great, so I will go to
Kevin
Carol.
Kelly has his hand up.
Yep, now a bunch are coming up, right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go to Carol Nolan. And I've just unmuted you, Carol.
Hi. So I live in the town of New Paltz. And what I want to say very carefully, because I come from a background of really valuing unions. And I don't want this to be taken otherwise. So I don't want to step into whether Cisco deserves to be fired or not, because I don't think I know enough to know the answer to that. But I do hope that your investigation will involve looking at what the delicate balance is between making sure that unions protect employees' working conditions and safety and job security, and at the same time that unions do not make it so that it is unduly difficult to let go someone who needs to be let go. And I don't want to say whether I even think Cisco is an example of that or not. I don't know. But I certainly have seen over the years, I've been watching police for, I don't know, maybe 45 years since I was a member of the rescue squad and had a lot of interaction with the police. And I certainly have seen over the years various members of the force who either were retired early or left the force and passed on with apparently okay recommendations to getting another job elsewhere. And that troubles me. Thanks.
Thank you. Who do we have next? I know that Kevin's hand was raised.
I'm gonna go.
Joan? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
Nope, that's okay. I'm gonna unmute Harper Keene.
Okay. Hi, Harper.
Hi. Just one note, I just got a call. A few people are maybe in the waiting room and trying to get in and not able to get in. So I'm not sure if an administrator is able to do that or not.
I'll take care of that right now, Harper.
Okay,
I
thank
see
you.
that. Yep.
Oh, shoot. First, thank you to the PRRC for doing this work and for holding the listening session. My comments are about the NPPD budget. The police get a vast amount of money. Based on our research, it feels clear that this money could be better spent. Specifically, it could be spent on services that support the community's basic needs: public transportation, subsidized or free food, mental health services, affordable housing, and public health services, among others. COVID has made it clearer than ever that these are the things people need to be healthy and secure. This is not what the police. I recently filed a FOIL request for the police for the last year from 9/15/19 to 9/15/20. In that time, less than half of 1% of the calls the NPPD responded to were for a violent incident. In the same period, however, the police performed 4,270 property checks. As far as I know, this means checking on people's houses for them, often when they're out of town. That's nearly 30% of all reported incidents and almost double the next largest category. As you know, in 2019, the police got at least $2.8 million, closer to $4 million if employee benefits are included. There's something unavoidably wrong when, for instance, the police are getting at least 100 times the funding that Family of New Paltz gets from the town, when family is providing such incontestably useful human services. This may be a tiresome stat by now, but the police get more than the highway department, fire department, the library, youth programs, ambulance corps, public health, the loop bus, and the rail trail combined. How can this be right? I think this context is what makes it so maddening and unbelievable that during a period of unprecedented scrutiny of the police, in the midst of a budget crunch, and while your collaborative is leading a community review of the police, that the town board has approved the hiring of 1 full-time officer, 2 part-time officers, 2 part-time dispatchers, and put out a solicitation for bids for a new $9 million police station courthouse. These numbers and actions are so far out of balance. I hope the collaborative will recommend reducing funding for police and investing that money where it's needed. Since December 2018, over 95% of arrests are crimes. In a low crime context like New Paltz, it seems like there's much to gain and little to lose in exploring new non-police responses to crises. And with simply having fewer police, let another agency, such as a mobile crisis response team, respond to a percentage of calls. If the experience of other municipalities holds true for us, this would both produce better outcomes and save money. Simultaneously, as we enter a third wave of COVID and local unemployment reaches record heights, I hope you'll recommend investment in the sustaining community resources at the beginning of my statement. Again, thank you.
Thanks, Harper.
Great, so I'm gonna go to next. I see it's just Don, so I'm going to unmute him.
Okay, Don, you have 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you all for being here. I'm glad you're doing this. I'm very glad that you're willing to serve the community to the members of the committee. And I'm glad that the governor's order has finally forced the town council into some movement on the police. 17 months ago, I began advocating to the town council on the urgency of creating an independent police commission. I personally volunteered. I supplied 12 other names of locals willing to serve, and there was no response for over a year. So I educated myself. I interviewed Randall about his police commission, interviewed Gowrie about her Citizens Advisory Commission. My own personal conclusion, our police department seems to have been managing this town council rather than the other way around. You know, I thank God there was no loss of life, but I viewed the Paul Echols incident as our own local George Floyd experience. An African-American man was admittedly struck in the jaw by a police officer while handcuffed and in police custody. Other officers in position to witness the assault testified that they did not. How is it there was no reconciliation with the public and no repercussions to the department regarding the Paul Echols incident? How is it that the CAC report was suppressed before it was even delivered? When I first addressed the town council 17 months ago, I explained that cameras and microphones issued to New Paltz Police Department officers, were not active during the event. My comment was repeatedly interrupted by Dan Torres saying, "That's not true, that's not true." It's not very fun being called a liar in public, so I did my homework. I asked the court clerk if I could review the transcript of the Echols trial. I was told there was no written transcript. There was only one path to get that information, and that was to hire an approved court reporter and create that written document. So I did that. Here it is. No one's seen that transcript but me. It's my personal property. And I'd like to volunteer to provide that information to the committee if you're willing to receive it. I would like also to suggest that the committee demand to see the suppressed report by the CAC to the town council. To those on the town council who have questioned my honesty, character, and motivation, I will not ask for an apology, but what I will ask rhetorically is, why do I know more about this incident than our town council acting as police commission? Did the town council receive their information from more than one source? Did they push back? Did they ask questions? It seems that the town council was misinformed. In fact, the camera in the back of the police cruiser, which would have recorded the blows that broke Mr. Echols' jaw, was not turned on. The front camera in the cruiser was on, but the microphone was not. The testimony of New Paltz police officers was contradictory regarding the moments when Mr. Echols was assaulted. This seems like New Paltz's original sin, and I feel like we can't move forward without investigating it and coming to some resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, I'm gonna go to Juna. Just give me 1 second.
Hi, Juna.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juna. I want to start also by saying thank you to the PRC for your work. And I really look forward to hearing all of the findings and the recommendations that you all have put together. So Governor Cuomo created Executive Order 203 in response to this summer's protests that demand change, action, and accountability in policing nationwide. He named the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative, but I hope that the work you all will do will be more expansive than reforms that expand police budget, protect police legitimacy, and increase the scope of policing. Because one thing we've learned from this summer is that police reform hasn't worked. And many people knew this before this summer. Reforms that give police more money and legitimacy have not and will not decrease harms against those most impacted by policing. The PRRC has the potential to go beyond reforms like body cameras, more training, or oversight boards, reforms that give police more resources and surveillance power and do not challenge the idea that police provide safety, an idea that's flawed at its core. When George Floyd was killed this summer, Minneapolis police had already undergone extensive anti-bias training, some of the most extensive in the country. They had received body cameras and they'd engaged in other reformist options for reducing police violence. These methods did not protect George Floyd. When Eric Garner was killed by New York police in July of 2014, it did not matter that lethal chokeholds had already been banned. The PRRC is in a position to create meaningful change to protect and extend the lives of people most impacted by police. Lead New Paltz in divesting from police, creating incremental changes that take money, power, and legitimacy away from the police, and invest that money into life-affirming institutions. The town of New Paltz currently allocates over $2.8 million to the New Paltz Police Department. New Paltz United for a Responsible Budget, which I'm a member of, has made a call for the reduction of the New Paltz Police Department's budget by 25% of its current size over each of the next 2 years, resulting in a cumulative reduction of 50%. A reduction in police spending that would redirect funding into the New Paltz community, including alternative forms of conflict resolution and emergency response. This balancing of the budget only makes more sense as we head into a COVID budget that is decreasing funding across the board. In 2018, only 20 violent crimes were reported in New Paltz. That's fewer reports than there are officers. 233 crimes of any kind were reported to New Paltz Police in 2014, and that number only dropped down to 165 in 2018. That's a lot of numbers, but basically what I'm saying is that that's fewer crimes of any type reported every other day in New Paltz. So obviously the first thing I know from that is that there's too many police in New Paltz in general. And the second thing is that there are more harms, there's harms happening in New Paltz that are not being addressed. I'm positive that more than once every other day, something happens where a person could use support from an outside moderator. And I think what is so amazing about this summer and made me think about these things in a different way is that it like opened the door to imagining new things. And so I'm asking the PRRC to imagine if when people needed help, there wasn't also the threat that people could go to jail or that someone would get hurt at the hands of cops. But the PRRC could lead New Paltz away from carceral reforms and towards community care that actually keeps people safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Juna.
So that's it for people with their hands raised, but looking at this list, I know I heard you say Kevin Kelly, for example, was looking
His
to speak.
his hand was raised.
So I just want to remind
earlier.
people if they want to speak that they should hit the hand raise icon, which is how I will know how to unmute you. But just while people are doing that, I'm going to unmute Kevin Kelly, assuming that he is looking to speak.
Yes, his hand is raised. And Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I don't know if you can just confirm that you can hear me, because,
I can
Can hear you.
okay.
Yes.
You know, I want to also thank you for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing the report. And I do want to go looking back, and I don't want to be duplicative, so I'm not going to go into the statistics other than to just reiterate much of what we've already heard. And I tend to be focused on the, looking back on how how complaints have been addressed. And, I would say that they've been unevenly addressed. They've been addressed in an opaque fashion. And I think that's a big problem that we have, going to what Don referred to about the trial. I don't know whether the town board as police commission was unaware of all that information or what, but in whatever the case is, there certainly was no reconciliation and reckoning with that incident. This more recent incident with a disciplinary action seemed to me incongruous in terms of the reaction. In other words, just to put it bluntly, the police officer for whom a complaint was made, who was the recipient of the complaint, to the best of my knowledge, continued on while the complaint was investigated, and that was, an alleged act of violence, or even an act of violence that was articulated by himself. And in the more recent incident, it was a video, and that officer was off duty for a significant period of time. I asked the town board as police commission in the last meeting to articulate the rationale and explain what the reason is for that inconsistency. And I was alerted today that there were written answers to the questions, and I went and looked through them. And the question I asked wasn't even included in the questions that were asked, and so there was no effort to answer the question. Nonetheless, nevertheless, I don't expect that there would have been a fulsome answer to the question, even if they had put answers to that question. So I along with the allocations of resources that have been brought up more than once by others here, I think that, in other words, looking at how officers might be not the first responders to incidents that probably don't require a person with the authority to put someone under arrest and bring them into the criminal justice system, or the authority to use force, or the ability to use deadly force. Along with that, we need to really hone in on how officers are held to account. The first speaker brought up the unions, the arbitration committee that dealt with the more recent complaint. That I don't know how long it's been that officer was out and is back in. But what they ended up with was what should have taken a week to figure out. There shouldn't have been a fight, and now anything that he's doing to, I don't think it's punishment per se, but an apology. I mean, how is it possible that required the pulling of teeth? So, I'm not sure that that the system that we have in place, is just going to work. And I call for courage on the part of the town board to say no to some of these systems, I call for, I just highly recommend you take a very hard look at the transparency, because, racism will not exist, and neither will just abuse of authority in an environment where there is crystal clear transparency and Klieg lights shined on the conduct. And then, honest facing up to what happened and how it was dealt with, and the budget issues that are also quite, again, opaque. We just can't. A lot of us are just shaking our heads at the amount of money allocated to a force in a low crime area, which is not to say that we don't need police, because I don't buy that, and I don't think most of the people here do.
Great.
But they get a lot more. They get a lot of resources that could be used for, ambulances, social and mental health specialists, and other kinds of ways of dealing with situations that the police probably don't want to be involved in a lot of cases anyway. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great.
Great. I'm going to go to Dan, who has his hand raised. And again, I just want to remind people, if you're interested in speaking, to raise your hand.
Great. Thank you. I want to also thank the PRRC for the time you're putting into this on top of all of your pre-existing responsibilities. As you know, in New Paltz and across the US, communities are reevaluating what kinds of situations warrant what kinds of responses. For instance, the city of Berkeley, California has decided that in the future, the Berkeley Police Department won't conduct traffic stops. Here in New Paltz, Chief Lucchese has said before that there are some kinds of calls or situations that the NPPD currently responds to that others might be better qualified to respond to. And while I know it's not the PRRC's job to manage the budgets of the town or the village, it's also very likely that in the future, the municipalities will not be able to spend what they currently do on policing, potentially even as soon as next year. So altogether, it seems like an exciting opportunity to consider how New Paltz could conserve municipal funds while also avoiding having the police respond to situations that might be better left for someone else. I hope a multi-year breakdown of the kinds of calls that the NPPD currently responds to will soon be made public, but the widespread impression is that a great deal of these are either substance or mental health related. In Eugene, Oregon, it's a college town just like New Paltz, albeit larger. The municipality uses a non-police entity called CAHOOTS, it's an acronym, to respond to 20% of 911 calls. Those related to substance abuse, mental health crises, low-level infractions like trespassing. The CAHOOTS response team consists of a medic, so either a nurse or an EMT, and a crisis worker well-versed in de-escalation and mental health support. Of the 24,000 calls CAHOOTS responded to in 2019, again, that's about 20% of the 911 calls, police were later called in to only 0.6%. So in 99.4% of those calls, a resolution was reached without having to involve the Eugene Police Department. And despite responding to 20% of the 911 calls, CAHOOTS receives only 2.8% of total police spending, saving the municipality over $20 million each year. As you might expect, a lot of municipalities across the US are now actively considering or already creating a CAHOOTS-like entity. And we at New Paltz United for a Responsible Budget think New Paltz should look into this too. We propose calling it the New Paltz Community Safety Team. It would be made up of medics and crisis workers, and it would save the town and village a lot of money, especially given how many calls are currently received for substance and mental health related situations, as well as for low-level nonviolent infractions like noise complaints. But importantly, it would also be a shift away from an approach to community safety that often results in people who are struggling with mental health or addiction getting tangled up in a punishment-oriented legal system. The emphasis instead would be on providing support to people experiencing desperate moments, non-coercively connecting them to resources like emergency housing, medical treatment, non-carceral forms of conflict resolution. It could also potentially be expanded to respond on campus in exchange for SUNY New Paltz agreeing to help subsidize the program. We're also calling for the creation of a restorative justice-based infrastructure in New Paltz that could be used to address both criminal and non-criminal harm, something that also exists already in many other communities. But I don't want to go on longer so that other people can speak. But I would encourage anyone who's interested to go to our website, nprespunsiblebudget.org, to learn more about these proposals and get in touch. And I hope the PRRC will explore the possibility of these alternative mechanisms for delivering community safety, given their impressive track records in other municipalities. I think public sentiment as well as budgetary prospects are both trending in a direction where these kinds of measures will become harder to ignore, and it would be great for New Paltz to be ahead of the curve. So thanks again for your time and for all the hard work you're doing already.
Thank you. Just a reminder, please state your name and where you're from before you start your comment, please. That'll help us.
And I see another hand that's come up, but just even before I go to,
I got Naomi Allen, and
Yep.
I got Joan Kombelik. I think that's another hand that's up. So why don't we go with Naomi, because I've seen her waving hands for quite a bit of time. So we'll go here, and then we'll go to Joan, and then I'll switch back to another page to see if somebody else is waving somewhere else.
all right, so I'm gonna unmute Naomi.
Okay. Hi, Naomi.
Hi, I do not have an icon on my screen that says raise your hand. I don't know if other people do. And I joined the meeting late because I wasn't allowed in for some reason for 10 minutes, but I just wanted to pick up on where Daniel kind of left off. I thought his contribution was very useful. And I think that one of the problems we have as a community, and not just in New Paltz, but more generally, is that we have these problems of poverty, unemployment, mental health crises, desperation, food insecurity. And instead of throwing money at those problems and trying to solve them by creating jobs through public works if necessary, we have lots that has to be done, creating affordable housing, creating childcare so women can go to work, addressing domestic abuse, what causes it, and solving it. Youth programs, mental health and addiction support. Instead of throwing money at those problems, we throw money at the police so they can go out and criminalize these problems when they turn into social real crime, when they turn to crime. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think we can figure that out ourselves, that if we do away with the issues that are causing the crime, we won't need a police force or a very limited police force. I mean, there's probably always going to be someone who's going to be dysfunctional for reasons that are hard to understand. But the extent, I mean, if we put money into youth programs instead of cutting things like youth programs, we would not have as many delinquent youth creating problems for the society. The countywide Institution for Mental Health and Addiction Support in Kingston is being closed permanently, not temporarily for COVID, but permanently. So there won't even be that level of mental health support. This is something every community needs. And it's not something that should be addressed by police. Food security. We could put money into making sure that every family has the food that it needs to be well nourished. As I said, youth programs, public works. We live in an area with an enormous amount of natural space, and we could be creating jobs through something like the Civilian Conservation Corps. Obviously, this is something that exists outside New Paltz too, but it's something that the community can be using this money for instead of the police. And, okay, that's it. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I believe let's go back to Joan Kombalek.
Second here. Yep, I see Joan, and I'm going to unmute her right now.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. Thanks for everyone for being here. I'd like to say thank you to Don Kerr for his investigation, and I'd like to learn about ways that there's more transparency about those events. This is really like the first time hearing anything about this, so I appreciate that. I'm wondering if there could be a little borrowing of police budget to get a more secure Zoom facility for this group, so that we don't have what just happened to us at the beginning of the meeting, which was pretty harsh. I would like to amplify the question around how can the police be hiring new people and renovating a building when we're in the midst of this community, this state, and this national discussion right now. I find that quite surprising. I have a question that I attended a town board meeting at the beginning of the summer where there was an absolute promise to publish a granular police budget, and I don't think that's been done, and I hope that this committee can facilitate that in some way. And finally, I'd just like to encourage this committee to hear from all the people who are not here. Having a woman who was seeking asylum legally here, seeking asylum in this country, living with me for a year, I can say that she's not served by so many community facilities like public transportation, and she feels too fearful to call police when she's involved in and exposed to domestic violence issues. So I hope that there's also listening groups for people who might have less facility with English or might have less fear even to attend groups like that. And it would be great if there were some innovative strategies to have listening groups among those communities as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, no hands on this page. Let's go to the second page. Is Maggie raising her hand?
Yep, I see Maggie.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I think she just went away. Give me a second. Okay, Maggie, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. Hi, good evening, and thank you for having this forum. It's really important that these kinds of things happen. Hopefully they'll happen a little more often, because I think the biggest difficulty some of us have is the need for more transparency, both at the town level, the police level, and I'm really glad that the steering committee is trying to be more transparent with this. So in relation to what I find most concerning about what is happening the last few months is that, number one, I'm going to say that there is a need for much more transparency with the budget. The town has added people to their budget, and it's a time when we shouldn't be doing that. But most importantly, the budget should be put on record so that we can see it more regularly. I would ask that the policy that the police have is to also include what their budget is on their site, and also to include what their contract is, include data on the kinds of stops they make, include data on the kinds of arrests they make, that people can just look. We don't need to be searching under a rug for that. And then the other thing is, how do we keep track, and how do you help us track what's happening with complaints that happen, and also with the commendations? I was at a town board meeting, and I was happy to hear there was conversations about people feeling very pleased with the police. And I myself have had some very good experiences with the police and some not so good. But the point really is that I think that if you create and track data that we can all use and share and view regularly, it would give us a much more more confidence in what we need to know about the police, and actually in the town too, for that matter, because one goes hand in hand. I would also just have to add that there is a tremendous need for developing an independent police commission. I signed a petition, I don't know, maybe 4 months ago, and there must have been 350 signatures on that, to the town, asking them to develop an independent police commission. And when I say independent, I would like to think that those people would not be selected, be political appointments, but that somehow there's a process that the community actually does identify who was on that police commission, in addition to what the town might want to, who the town might want to put on there. The other thing I'd like to focus on is how do we limit the numbers of contact that the police have with the community? I was at a forum in Newburgh about a month ago with Michael Sussman, who happened to be the attorney for the Paul Eccles case. And repeatedly, he said the most important thing that any town can do to try to limit the amount of harassment that people might feel with the police is really just to try to limit the number of contact they have with them. And it would seem that traffic stop seems to be the biggest issue. So I'm not sure how we can probably reduce the amount of money we spend on the police if we look at the nature of the traffic stops, as someone has already said, and who can be doing that differently. I don't like cameras generally to track the public, but I think maybe that's a compromise that we can reach. Maybe it's having cameras around the town that somehow flash when somebody is running through a stop sign or certainly a stoplight. But I think the biggest thing I'd like to say is that we have to figure out how we reduce the number of contacts that the police have with the public, because the reality is we're not going to change things overnight. We will not be able to train them overnight. And those of us who feel that contacts with the police can be positive also feel that very often they're negative. And if we simply reduce them, we would be reducing a budget, and we would be looking at shifting those resources to other areas. So the other thing that I think that the commission should be looking at is what is recidivism rates of cases that are happening here right in New Paltz, and how do we focus on those cases to help offset? And there is, I guess it's like 60 to 70% of the cases that are brought back to trial, rather back to jail or back to the public entities that are responsible for policing, are really because of probation violations that are technical in nature. So I don't know if the commission itself is looking at, if the steering committee is looking at the nature of what happens right here with our own community, the rest of people in our own community. But I'd ask you to look into that, because I know that the county has been trying to look into that, and they are. So I would encourage that. Look at what is happening with people who are coming back to our own local courts for things that may have been technical in nature. So I think I'm not as, for me, the other thing that I'd like to have you look into is restorative justice practices. I'm sure that you are already doing that, and I hope that you will share the information that you are gleaming from your research somehow on your website, because it is to be transparent. We have to know what information you're using so that we can understand it better. So that if there's if there's a way that you can include on the website the data sources that you're using so that we understand how you're doing that. And I guess the only other thing I could think of is, can you please try to identify for us, what are the priorities? How are you establishing your priorities in relation to what community input you're given? Because that way we understand what you'll be giving and why you'll be giving the priorities you may end up giving in your report. I guess that's it.
Okay, I have Tanya Marquette next.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted. Yep.
Okay, very good. Okay, I've been listening to people's comments, and I think there's some very, there's been some, a bunch of very good and important comments that have been made around various issues that people are concerned with policing. But I have a different approach, and I'm a little disturbed that this has not been the center of the conversation. I read EO 203 several times, and the essence of that document was to deal with, racism and police, misbehavior really towards people of color and other marginalized people. And that to me is really the essence of what this conversation and this work needs to be about. And my focus is institutional and historical. I cannot think about policing without looking at the history of what policing is in this country, where it came from, its roots, and how those early beginnings have telescoped through, the decades and centuries, to today. Policing, as probably many of you know, began with slave patrols. It was all about terrorizing people of color to keep them under control and maintain power of the elite, white supremacists. That situation hasn't changed, which is one of the reasons that, if not the reason, why all the reformist efforts that communities have made fail, because they have not dealt with the structural problem. And if we're not talking about the nature of the structure of community safety and, and how it gets, controlled by the community, then we are not doing anything from my point of view, despite the best efforts and well-meaning efforts of, pretty much everybody, I would say. One of the things that has occurred to me in my thinking about this is that the main reason I think that community advisory type committees and stuff fail is because they do not have power of their own. You cannot have some kind of an advisory committee that's under the thumb of another authority with this. And it seems to me that one of the things that we need to be looking at in this community is how we create an independent oversight committee for community safety. And I much prefer the concept of community safety as opposed to policing, because the issue is really safety and how do we want to live in a safe community. And policing has become the center of that concept, but to me, it's not the center of that concept at all. Some people have kind of referenced it, but they haven't defined it as clearly as I think I'm trying to. I think that one of the things that can be done is we have an independent oversight commission that gets elected, and the qualifications to run for that commission has to be either you're a person of color or somebody who has had experience dealing with racism in policing and public safety. And it needs to be a committee with a time limit, like maybe 2 years, because you wind up getting people who get entrenched in power structure that they wind up creating by longevity. And so we need to prevent that structurally from happening. I think that we need to start looking at creating oversight by figuring out how do we actually control that oversight so that anybody who is hired to do policing work knows that they are going to come under the authority of an independent voice that, you know, that they will have to answer to, which is one of the biggest problems we've had. This does not happen. We have had no structure that really controls what the police do, which is why they function generally with impunity and expect to pretty much get away with whatever they're doing, because that's what typically has happened. And it's only because there was a massive community outpouring on the Paul Eccles case where we, and I say we because I was one of those people, forced the issue. And we wound up getting a top-notch civil rights lawyer who tackled the town on this issue, that we got any sense of justice around this at all. Typically, we were told by the judge then that this was the first jury trial in 2 years in New Paltz. People don't go that way because they're intimidated into pleading guilty in order to just get away from the situation because it's so threatening to them. So I think that we need to really start looking at the nature of community safety and the structures of community safety and how it gets meted out and who controls that. And, you know, and if you do have police on the street, how do you control them? I mean, I don't know how many years we've been trying to get a copy of the police contract to see how it's written, and we still can't get that. I would say it's at least 7 or 8 years that since we've been asking for this. So these are just some of my thoughts. There are others. I think there are other towns and communities around the country that are experimenting with and researching how to create community-based safety measures as opposed to community-based policing. And I think that we need to change our perspective. We need to change the context within which we discuss this. And I think we need to start doing something that really is progressive, because otherwise we are not going to be doing anything. The issue of racism is just absolutely entrenched in policing. It is a class-based, you know, structure. It was always designed that way. It functions that way in New Paltz. It functions that way throughout the country, which is why we still have the problems and the situations that we have. I am just very, very tired of opening up my email every day and reading about police shooting young Black people, you know, who are unarmed, who have not done anything of any consequence. I am just livid that we are still living in this kind of an environment. And I think it's because we're not looking at it clearly enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Who do we have next?
I'm not seeing anyone who's looking to participate.
Going once. Going twice. Well, thank you all for your comments. And again, if you chose not to speak tonight, but to listen and something pops into your head between now and whenever, feel free to email us at npprrc@gmail.com. We'll read everything. Anything that's mentioned here tonight or in an email is on the table. So it will be heard, it will be read, and we will be discussing it. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for participating. And I look forward to sitting down with my colleagues and the rest of the individual groups that we plan on meeting with in November and December, and see if we can continue the conversation in a little more intimate session so that people will have the opportunity to go into a bit more detail rather than 2 minutes or 3 minutes. All right, thank you so much.